gain access to the RTX 5090 via a viewer. And I'm going to post that link in chat for you guys to check out. Be sure to go ahead and give the video a like. I'm just going to go over some of the key points. Now, what I have found is I did provide the overclocks, at least for the memory and for the core clocks, best I could with the limited amount of time we had. And we were able to garner some pretty interesting information. We saw, I believe this was zealous hash, which is where we kind of started out at. And you saw that we were able to essentially get the memory up to 16,801 megahertz. And that was with a plus 3,000 memory offset overclock. And that is actually about 1,000 megahertz below what the RTX 5080 that's back here on the bench gets. So not all GDDR7 is created equal. I mean, the actual modules themselves could. What I think's going on is the actual memory configuration. Not dissimilar to like going from dual channel to quad channel on memory. You know, if you go from dual channel to quad channel on system memory, basically your XMP profiles have to be knocked down a little bit. You lose a little bit of basically a little bit of clock performance, right? I think because the 5080 or 5090 has a lot more memory on board and it has different configuration, I think that's what we're running into. That's why we're seeing only 16,801 megahertz versus the 17,801 megahertz on the 5080. Of course, I don't know either exactly which model this was. Maybe one of y'all in chat can tell me. I think it was a Founders Edition, which you would think would be binned pretty high. But I do have the Asus Tough Edition over here. And from what we could tell as well, the temperatures seem to be running okay. They were still, like you can see here, at least what's reporting in software, that once we started overclocking the memory on the 5090 Founders, it was at 82C. Now, in comparison to the RTX 5080, that's about 10 to 12C degree difference, like delta. Basically, it's running that much hotter on the 5090. Could that just be actually all temperature limitations on the GDDR7? Yes, and that would be the good news. And basically it would mean that the Founders Edition is not trading blows with like an Asus Tough Edition. Of course, the Tough Edition is going to be $300 to $500 more, but your memory is going to run cooler. It's going to have higher overclocking potential. These are kind of the things I'm keeping the eye out for. You know, in the past here through the 3000 series, it was kind of like Founders Edition for the best binning, the best temperatures, all that sort of thing. For the most part, it's looking like it is shifting back into the hands of the third parties, at least on the upper end models. And that is not just liquid cooled, because the Tough Edition's only air cooled. Now, on the core, I think the 5090 needs a ton more research done on it in particular, because right now all I could do was say, how low can we get it, right? Now on the 5080, keep in mind, of course, your core clocks are going to be different across board models, as well as, you know, vendors, all that sort of stuff. But it is still Ada, right? Or Blackwell. So Ada Blackwell, is that what it is? Yeah, Ada Lovelace, Ada Blackwell. So the 5080 will downclock all the way to 1700 megahertz on the core. And what that gives you is a superior advantage to essentially the efficiency numbers. And that is what we were finding for sure, is like, because the 5090 really couldn't get below, it appeared to me, 2100 megahertz, right? It seemed as if on the 5090, we had to always have, even if we did a 1700 base, we had to add the plus 400. Otherwise, the card would crash. that means that essentially you are utilizing more power and you don't really have that capability of going down. Now, typically, if you are, underclocking a card, underclocking performs the same across, all models. There's not usually, you can't usually go even further down. It's when you start trying to go up at a lower voltage that you end up, basically seeing the performance differences of the better binning, right? So because the 5090 is binned very well, and presumably because it was a founder's edition, and because essentially it won't go below that mark, I do think that efficiency wise, it's just not going to be on par with, say, like the 5070 Ti or even the 5080. And that seemed to prove out true, right? You can go over the whole video if you want. Some other takeaways, I believe, was like Ergo, which we did get up to the 530 mega hash a second on Ergo, and that was at 1.2 mega hash a second per watt. Was better efficiency on the 5080 as well on that one. And then so it did get all the way up to 583. That's right. Okay. And that's when we had the plus 3000 plus the 1700 plus 400 offset on the core. That got to 1.5. Wait, that was almost 2 mega hash a second per watt. Now, the 5080 is like way up there, like 2.4 type thing. But there is still more tweaking, not a lot of time on it. But even like at these clocks, like the 5080, I still have to play with the 5080 more, and it's already kind of wiping the board with the 5090 on efficiency levels. It is pretty cool though to see like basically almost 600 mega hash a second on Ergo. That's just really neat. And then he tested a few other ones. I think, was this the highest he got up? Yeah, once he pumped the core to like 2197, he was able to get over 600 mega hash a second. That was just done for fun. Keep in mind that efficiency was not good. So that's not something you'd want to push for, on a 24/7 mining situation. The mem got really, really hot as well. You can see here that the memory was getting up to 94 degrees C reported in temperature. That's like 24 degrees Celsius above that of the 5080 and at 1000 megahertz less. So I think the Founders Edition is not the route you want to go. I don't know what they're doing to cool the memory, but it doesn't seem to be the route at this point. It seems like, especially in a mining scenario, that you want to go the route of aftermarket cooler. I also, it's hard to gauge how accurate this is with just remote access. I think, what was the other one he had up here? He did go over, yeah, the Octopus was 175. I believe the Fish Hash was in here somewhere, but I'll let you guys go watch the video to see the rest of it. Those are my initial thoughts right now. If somebody was to ask me like which 50 series that's currently out should I buy, I would say the 5080 if we were talking specifically for mining. If we were talking about which 50 series overall, my first inclination is to say wait for the 5070 Ti. There's a specific reason for that. You have less CUDA cores, right? But you have the exact same memory as you do on the 5080. Now, what does that mean? That means that you have the same performance as far as total hash rate to the 5080 on memory intensive algorithms. So, Ergo, ETC hash, a Fish hash, Octopus even to a certain extent, Ravencoin, Zealous, right? So all that stuff is going to be better in general on the memory intensive algos. And since you are using less CUDA cores on the 5070 Ti but have the same memory performance, I think it's going to be the efficiency king. Like, I think it's going to wipe the board with everything else currently out. The 5080 is already, except for Fish Hash and ETC Hash, and of course Ravencoin, it's wiping the board with everything, even the CMP 170. So Ravencoin, obviously, Kapow, all that sort of stuff. AMD's the way to go for that. I wouldn't recommend any NVIDIA GPU at this point for that one in particular. You could argue in the case of, like, if you would ever mine any ET hash coin ever, or if you're into Fish Hash. So Fish Hash, CMP 170, if that's your bag. I think if you're mining ET hash based coins with a GPU, you're doing it wrong. I think at this point, just scratch that idea. Outside of maybe, of course, ETH B3 on Hypera. But Hypera's struggling. They just lost their community manager. I'm not sure we're going to see Hypera be successful whatsoever. Just a side note there. I think they're really struggling. And I actually do have mined it. And I do have a bag. It's just if I'm objectively looking at it, it seems like they're struggling really bad over there. So I wouldn't, literally buy a card for that. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the CMP 170 is going to be 500, the 5080 is going to be 1,000. Yes, I get that point. I understand it. Resale value on the 5080 is astronomically better than the CMP 170. Okay. You resell a CMP 170, you're reselling it to miners. End of story. Game over. Doesn't matter. I mean, unless you're like, you trick someone, which is just unethical. It's just, that's the way it is. The 5080, you can mine on that thing. And then, we got a 3-year cycle, 2 to 3 year cycle, it's about a good 2 years of being able to resell whatever the latest gen NVIDIA that was released, with maybe people starting to wait for the next gen 3 years in, right? Something like that. Anyways, so you have a lot more resale ability on the 50 series as far as that's concerned. Now, AI throwing that kink into it, of course, I think you probably still want to lean towards probably like a 4090 or potentially a 5090. And that's a fair point. And if 4090 GPUs come down in price to like that $1,000 price mark, I think a 4090 over a 5080 just makes sense across the board. You have more options. It's going to last a little bit longer as well, and it'll outsell a CMP 170 on the secondhand market as well. So all those things kind of think about as we start getting more numbers rolling in for Blackwell. And I'm super excited though. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.